What's up, folks? We're gonna do this quick live. I'm gonna do a quick live for you. It's called Baltimore is Burning, and I'm sure you guys can get with that. But before we get to that part, I gotta always bring some music through this joint. Hold up. Baltimore two-step, Baltimore two-step, yeah. Baltimore two-step, Baltimore two-step, to the left, to the right, throw it up and swag it out. Then you take it to the front, throw it up and back it out. Hello, hello, motherfucker, hey, how you doing? Hello, hello, motherfucker, how you doing? Hello, motherfucker, how you doing? Everybody got their chance now, I think it's our turn. Okay, don't bring them to my section if them hoes ain't pretty. I got Diddy by the bottle and some rosé with me. My niggas got that piffy, you know I got that vodka. So fuck it, oh let's do it, bitch. I'm on my waka flocka, talking all black, sitting on chrome. Benzo, big body with the top gone. Kimbo, my bitch get new bags and my car get new wheels. Yeah, I got it on deck like a barbecue grill. I be murking through the streets, screeching that powder cutty. I'm from Baltimore, baby, I'm beastin', you gotta love me. Got a freaky little Rican that frequently gotta touch me. So my hand behind her head like I'm teaching her how to Dougie. I said, hello, motherfucker, hey, how you doing? Hello, hello, motherfucker, hey, how you doing? How you doing? All right, y'all. We're gonna get this thing going real quick. Let me go ahead and get this together. So real quick, guys. I was talking to a friend of mine, colleague of mine, who lives out in California, and he asked me a pretty interesting question, and I decided to do a quick live stream about it called Baltimore is Burning. And so his question was simple. He said, you know what? I live out here on the West Coast, and we see the news and everything about Baltimore. Is it really that bad? Like, is it really that bad? And I had to explain to him. I said, Baltimore is a city just like any other city. It's got its good things, it's got its bad things. It's got sports teams. We've got great history. We've got, um, you know, historic landmarks, monuments, the Inner Harbor, major tourist attractions, the updated construction going on over in the Port Covington area. They're trying to redo East Baltimore. I mean, there's a lot going on here other than murder, which is all you hear about when it comes to Baltimore. And the reason why all you hear about is the negative of Baltimore is because negativity is toxic and it's similar to a fire. It catches on and it burns something else. So that's why I wanted to use the terminology Baltimore is burning. Not literally. That hasn't happened since the Freddie Gray riots, which were, of course, portrayed on TV as if the whole city was burning when really it was just a corner of a particular block. I went through there myself, and I'm still here to talk about it. And I was not accosted or threatened or anything. Actually, me and my ex-wife rode right through on our motorcycles that day while things were going on. Stuff was on fire, police were everywhere, but we were still able to move through our city without, much problem. But then on TV, CNN had the entire world thinking that the whole city was on fire. And the truth of the matter is, that is the narrative that works best for the media. You know, good news is great, but that's not what people seem to want to hear, or at least that's not what they seem to want people to hear. Because if that were the case, they would talk about the good things that are going on in Baltimore far more than they talk about the negatives. I have been present for multiple community events, um, outreach programs, police involved, community restoration type events, cleanup events, trash cleanup events, and you don't really hear about a lot of that stuff, or at least not outside of the Baltimore area. So if you can imagine a world of people who just hear nothing but negative information about a place, they're probably not going to want to visit that place. They're probably going to think that anybody from that place is negative, and that will continue until there's a positive narrative about that same place. So I want to give you the positive narrative about this place. If you've never been to Baltimore, um, like I said, just like any other city, there's some spots you don't want to go to. It is what it is. You can go to any city, Cincinnati, go up to New York, go to Philly. Heck, you can go to Wilmington, Delaware, and there's some spots you really don't want to go to. So that's nothing new. But what is new is the fact that Baltimore City has a deep, deep history in the Southern Maryland Confederacy. A lot of people don't understand that, don't really know that. They may not understand that Annapolis, which is the state capital, is actually one of the largest, or was one of the largest slave ports in Northern America, or in the northern part of America, because Maryland is the first southern state. So basically, slaves would be brought into Maryland and then would be distributed south at that point. So everybody would come in up here, and everybody would then end up in Virginia, North Carolina, so on and so forth, down through the south. So that's part of Maryland's history. Now, a lot of people would want you to think that Maryland as a state was a northern state. Why? Because a lot of people migrate here from Philly, New York, Boston, a lot of places that are north of here. So a lot of the population is a northern population. But the state's history is what really dictates this place. And history is what all of this is made of. Baltimore is only burning because nobody's putting the fire out. If you really think about it, you can go back in history. Forget the Confederacy and all that. Yeah, they took down the monuments, but what did that really do? It just made some extra space for something else to be put there. But it really didn't change the history of the state and how Baltimore came to be what it was. A lot of people don't know, or what it is and what it was. But a lot of people don't know that the projects in Baltimore were actually designed for segregation. They were designed for Jewish communities, black communities to be separate from each other on purpose. Like that was literally what the point of some of these projects that they've now torn down, and they've done a lot more than just let them be. But you have to understand that the uh, the Baltimore city government is who governs everything. And we can fast forward a few years from when this was a Confederate Southern state, and get to the point of understanding that there is some change that kind of happened, because the state, not the state, but the city of Baltimore is predominantly black. I think it's about 65, maybe 70% black, which is definitely more than half. And because of that, or what they want us to think is that because of that, is the reason why the city is so bad, is because it's filled with black people. But unfortunately, that's a lie. And it's a lie that's been told by some of the most influential government personnel and so on and so forth. But this place, although it is predominantly black, is not dangerous because of that. What's dangerous here is the disconnect between the governing bodies, the police, and the community. If you look at those in three different lights, you got the governing bodies, that would be your mayors, governors, city council. And I don't really want to go too hard on the city council, because I do appreciate what they try to do, and I do appreciate Brandon Scott for what he's trying to do as well. So let that not be forgotten. I think Brandon Scott's a really good guy. I met him once or twice, over the last few years, and he's really genuinely got a heart for the city. He was born here. He's been a youth in the city during some of the worst times of Baltimore City. So if anybody's thinking of voting for him as mayor, it's not a bad vote. Um, but also, what we have to use is that analogy. Brandon Scott is a younger guy. He's more connected to the community that surrounds the Baltimore area, the black community, as well as the white communities, and other communities, Asian communities, there's Latin communities. Everybody knows Baltimore is very diverse. So if you take that into account, and you realize that the governing bodies, with the exception of Brandon Scott and a couple of other city council persons, are all older people. And then you have like the state's attorney, who's a younger black woman. You've got some of the other, say, like district representatives, district council members, and those personnel are also black, but most of them are older. So that age gap is also causing Baltimore to continue burning, because everyone knows a lot of older people just don't really get along with younger folks. There's too much of a disconnect as far as culture, trends, and things of that nature. So what happens is a total disconnect between those that are governing and those that are actually being governed. So it creates this conflict to say, I am the one being governed, but you're not even asking me for input when you're coming up with the rules. And without asking the community for input, what they're doing is they create the divide. So, as they say, shit rolls downhill. And recently, Baltimore has had a very tough history with the mayoral seats. Um, Even right now, the mayor's race is coming up. The current mayor, who is right now, is Mr. Young. I don't even think he wants the job anymore, and he just kind of got put into it because the previous mayor was caught in a scandal. Basically a conflict of interest type of scandal that was worth almost $1 million, and that was what we'll remember her by. Previous to Miss Pugh, there was my favorite. I don't care what nobody says. Was Stephanie Rawlings Blake. They gave her a bad way to go with the riot situation when she said she wanted to give the children room to destroy. Might not have been the best choice of words, but the point that she was trying to make was that if the police were to engage teenagers, then we would have had a bunch of teenagers get killed that day. And so her decision wasn't a bad one, even though the governor and some others would like you to think that she was trying to sacrifice the city so that some kids could get some frustrations out. But the truth of the matter is, if she would have dispatched the police department to handle that in the way that they've handled other things, like Freddie Gray's arrest and many other situations, I can guarantee you that story would have been different, and there would have been a bunch of 15-year-old kids that got killed or hurt or whatever, as well as police. And then they would have been upset with her for dispatching the police. So she was in a no-win situation, and it definitely was a political almost suicide for her. So Steph, if you happen to see this video, know from me, I still like you, and I thought you were the best thing since I've been around this area. I did see a reduction in crime, a reduction in killing until the Freddie Gray thing happened. Then everything changed. So that would all be after Steph. And I call her Steph because she was just so cool. She was that cool. I met her a few times. She was actually very down to earth mayor. She didn't separate herself from the city so much. She went out to events. Like she showed up at a few parties that I did and just was there to, just interact with the community, which is what has to be done. Baltimore is burning. How can you put out the fire if you don't go to the site and the scene of where the fire is coming from, which is the community? That's who's getting killed. That's who's on drugs. That's who's in poverty, is the community. That's the fire that needs to be put out. And until we get past the point of dealing with poverty as a construct and start to understand that if we float our resources, not just monetarily, but intellectually. A lot of the young people in Baltimore that I've met, that I mentor and that I coach in basketball and football over the years, I've noticed that one of their biggest complaints is that they don't have anything to do. And I can attest to that because I'm a coach. And other than the things that I'm coaching and some of the other programs that I coach with, some of these other community resources like the PAL centers and things like that were taken away a long time ago. In school, extracurricular activities, after school programs, totally taken away. And then you send these kids to an empty house where their parents are working when they get out of school, and you wonder why they get into mischief when the rec centers and things like that were actually saving kids and not just saving money. So what we must understand is that the burn that comes from Baltimore comes from the fact that from the top down, there's a disconnect at every step. And that in and of itself is going to continue us in this cycle. What good is a crime plan if the community hasn't put any actual input into it? That's who the crimes are being committed against. So you come up with a crime plan just based on a police blotter of what happened and where, but you haven't talked to the community. And in most cases, when the community is spoken with, for whatever reason, they seem to be looked at like suspects. They tend to be treated like criminals, and that's why the community doesn't like to deal with the police in Baltimore. So what I do see and what I do know is that the city has a lot of great things going for it. One of the things that we need to understand is this next generation, the Brandon Scotts. I think Brandon Scott's in his late 30s, something like that. That's who needs to be in power in Baltimore because that's who's getting killed is young men and young women. We need to restart. All respect for Jack Young, all respect for Larry, the governor, Hogan. Respect. You guys have worked long and hard to get to where you are, but the torch has to be passed in order for the race to be won. And the reason why we're going downward is because the torch is not being passed and the fire is just burning. And the people who have the physical ability and the passion, like Brandon, they're not at the table for the conversation. Just like myself, I'm doing this as a live stream. Is anybody inviting me to the table? Not at all. And I'm in the community of Baltimore every week doing whether it's events and parties, closed drives, um, mentoring programs, coaching, sports. I'm all over the place in that city. And I'm doing all these things to touch these children and touch these people directly. It's not about legislation. It's about position. It's about being there. Just like Stephanie Rawlings Blake used to do. She went to parties that I did, and I can really attest to the fact that she wasn't just there because somebody forced her to be. She knew that the community that surrounded her office was who she had to connect with, and she did the best she could to do that. So, our current administrators are still looking at things in this old fashioned way. You need Brandon Scott and people like him, people like myself, people who still have the youth in their grasp um, and are not too far disconnected from the community to earn the respect of the streets because that's who's killing too. So if the thugs and the gangsters and whatever you want to call them, some of them are just dudes that are confused and don't have nothing to do. But if they're the ones doing the killing and you can't connect with them, how are you going to stop the killing? It's a simple equation if you really think about it. In order to connect with the right people, you have to connect with the right people. And if you don't have a platoon of Brandon Scotts, an entire, you know, foundation of folks who are like him, folks who are like me, folks who are like my friend Gary out in Baltimore on the street. Like he be on the street breaking up fights between dope boys, and he don't even have a gun. So, well, sometimes, he's an ex-marine, so he's allowed to carry certain things. Don't get it twisted. But he doesn't do it with a gun. He does it with his voice, and he does it with talking sense to young men in Baltimore. He does this all the time. Have I ever seen a story about this guy? Nope. I keep hearing about the same people. So we have to connect the Brandon Scotts to the people like me. We have to connect the people like me and Gary to the Brandon Scotts and the Marilyn Mosbys, the folks that are going to be the future. Because all respect given to the older guys, man, I love y'all, but y'all not going to be here in a few years. And we still are. So you got to hand that torch over and stop acting like these, town hall meetings are doing anything because you're not listening. The community is speaking and the legislation is not listening. And if I had my way, I would probably put Brandon Scott in that mayoral position. But there's a lot that's going to come with that. And I worry for him because he's still young. And the government has a way of tainting people over time. So hopefully he gets that position when the time comes, when the vote comes. But if not, I'm sure he'll continue to do what he's doing in the community because that's who he is. So at some point, the torch will be passed to him. And in the interim, sorry about that. In the interim, we have to understand that we need to embrace the positives of our city and build on them, like the football team, like the Ravens. I mean, the Ravens are killing right now. And I even checked the police blotter. Do you know that crime goes down during Ravens games? Every week they play. In most cases, nobody gets shot during the actual game. All across the city, everything changes just because the Ravens are playing. So that's why their current, I guess, catchword that they're doing for their shirts now is unity, because somebody told them the same thing. When you guys are playing, the whole city is watching, and everybody has unity. So granted, we can't have the Ravens play all the time every day so we can stop killing each other. But What we are able to see is that positive energy produces positive results. So if we change the narrative of the negative energy and take away the toxicity of the stories that come out of the city of Baltimore, and we start to focus only on the positive, murders are going to happen. Let the police solve them. If you're looking for somebody, put that on the news. But other than that, I don't want to hear about it. I want to hear about Lamar Jackson and these Ravens. I want to hear about what's really going on to improve the community, not what's wrong with the community. Because the community is not who I'm seeing speaking. I'm seeing a bunch of people that don't even live there try to tell me about a place that they've never been, that I've been more frequently than they have, and I don't live there. So if you've never been there, you've never really interacted with that community there in, let's say, Irvington or something like that, how do you know what Irvington even needs? What, because it's in your jurisdiction, you think you know everything? You don't. So you have to reach out to the right people, not just the folks that are in these high end positions making a bunch of money and they're totally disconnected from the communities that they serve. Not to say that that's everybody. There are definitely a number of city councilmen and district representatives who are trying, but they're all disconnected from each other because the overall majority is totally disconnected. The police department is disconnected from the community, and the community is disconnected from the legislation. So you have three different pieces in a triangle totally disconnected. And how can that triangle turn into a circle if none of the edges can touch? So you have to really understand that this city is not on fire literally, but it is burning because there's a toxic energy that's taken over. And that energy is really the energy of old age and old thoughts and non-evolution and lack of growth. That's what's going on right now. The city's not growing because the people in power aren't growing. So that's why we need to add some youth. We need to bring this place back together. We got to do what we got to do, man. This is Baltimore. This is our city. Maryland, this is our state. I don't care if it's a southern state. I don't care. It's a beautiful state. We got mountain ranges. You can go skiing and swimming in the same state. That's Maryland for you. We got a football team. We don't have a basketball team yet, but watch what I tell you. Give that a few years too. And before you know it, Royal Farms Arena will be the home to some new Baltimore basketball team. But in order to do that, we have to stop having people kill each other. And in order to do that, we have to connect with the people that are actually doing the killing. And I don't mean connect with them when you get arrested or when they get arrested. I mean connect with them before they kill somebody. Give them options. Give them another way to go. Because most people just, you've always heard we die for lack of information. And that's really true. A lot of times we just don't know better. We don't know another way to do stuff. So it looks like my live is glitching out now. So I don't know why. And I hate that. Jeez. Nonetheless, it doesn't really matter much to me. But what I can say is we can grow, but we have to plant seeds that are young. We can't be planting old dead trees expecting them to grow leaves. So Baltimore City, keep your head up. We got this. All right. You see me right here? You see me? Cashland, baby. That's Baltimore. That's a Baltimore original brand right there. Basketball team that I one of the teams I coach, and they're sponsored by a local business, a local black business. So we're here, man. We're supporting each other. We're doing this. But we are definitely disconnected from the powers that be. And then when we do connect with them, it always seems to be a conflict. And I'm tired of the conflict. I want that unity. We're relentless. The Ravens said it. We're relentless. And that's how we get down. So I'm hoping that y'all can receive this message without receiving it negatively because I don't want to add to negativity, but I want to add to the true understanding that every city has its problems. But if all you do is focus on the negative, you will never, ever, 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 ever get to see that positive. So don't forget, like, subscribe, all that good stuff on the YouTube thing. I'm going to keep coming with topics. Everybody's talking to me. They're like, look, man, you just got to put the stuff out there, see what people think. And I'm going to do it. And there's really nothing that can stop us these days. So let's just get ourselves together, get our unity, root for this team, man. Historic team, man. But Let's not forget, love yourself, love your family, and the rest of people should love you back. If that doesn't happen, don't overreact. All right? How you doing? Baltimore two-step, Baltimore two-step, Baltimore two-step, Baltimore two-step. To the left, to the right, throw it up and swag it out. Then you take it to the front, throw it up and back it out. I'm tripping. Y'all be